Hi, and welcome to the Cloud Architects Podcast. I'm here with my co-hosts, Chris.
Hello.
And Warren.
Hey, how's it going?
Chris, before we introduce our guest for this episode, you've made some recent time zone changes.
Yep. I feel like I've been hopping through time zones over the last few months. The last show, I was actually with you guys in Cape Town. That was awesome fun. I'm still getting over the sunburn from that, but I'm back in Australia now, back in Australia full time. So it's just a little after 8 p.m. Here, and I know it's morning time for you guys. So, I think this is going to add a new dynamic to our show, right, with the Aussie time zone. But glad to be here as always.
Shame, you're always the one suffering though. It's
Well,
either early morning or it's late evening.
Yeah, there's one of me and two of you, right? So I always get outvoted. But we also like to make it easy for the guests, I guess. So
No, sure.
It does mean though that you'll probably do it's already early evening for you. It might be like early morning if we do someone in America.
Oh, for sure. I think we've done those sort of 1 a.m. was probably the latest or earliest that I've done before, but I'm sure there'll be more of those coming. But hey, it's all in good fun, right?
So I want to talk about Kexin for a second. And before I welcome Kexin, I just want to mention that her LinkedIn profile says that she is a cloud migration and implementation person, and that she's a certified Scrum Master at scale, IHL version 4, and AWS cloud practitioner. And we love all clouds equally. Well, not really, but we do have space for AWS in our hearts. And so let me just say hi, Kexin, and welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here.
So we're rather excited to have a discussion with you because we spoke a little bit off air and we got some detail on you. And I had the advantage of seeing you in another forum, which we'll talk about on the show, and I'll just preserve the air of mystery for everyone who's listening. Kexin, we know there's a lot more to you than just this title and how you got to this title. Do you mind telling our listeners a little bit of who you are?
Yes, sure, I'd love to. So I'm Kexin and I am based in Berlin, Germany. But as you can see, I don't really look like the typical German. So I guess that's also something that is ingrained in my life story because, growing up as a third culture kid with parents who have just, that came here 30 years ago with not really speaking the language here and having to build something from scratch, that did really impact me in the way that I want to live my life. And therefore I've always been very, very ambitious, and I've always wanted to do things for myself and create something for myself. Ultimately, if I maybe tell a little bit more about what's on my LinkedIn profile and just like a little bit more of a summary of what I've done always. I have a business background. I've studied international business in the UK and in Germany, but I have now transitioned to tech, and that has been quite an exciting journey because I have been working in the financial services industry as a self-employed person, and I worked there for about 4 years. Before that, I have founded my own little online shop while I was studying in the UK, and I just sold jewelry via social media marketing. And before that, in high school, I have founded a small little students company with few of my classmates, and we founded a business model based on fair trade, where we sold fair trade chocolate and fair trade coffee, in order for the coffee and chocolate farmers to get more of their money, by eliminating the middleman and the logistics. And it was after the finance business that I've had where COVID hit. COVID hit year 2020, and March 2020 was the first time Germany got into lockdown. And you like I was someone who was working 24/7. I mean, all of you can relate, right? You just work the whole time. You don't really get to reflect a lot or to actually, think about whether or not this is something you're passionate about. You just are results driven, and that was the person that I was. And in the lockdown, it was the first time for me to actually calm down. I was thrown out of my routine, and it was the first time for me to actually reflect, okay, is what I am doing currently, is that really something I'm passionate about? Do I feel that fire in the morning where I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, I need to get into the office. I'm so excited. There's so many things and I'm just pumped. And no matter how tired I am, I just want to do it. And to be honest, it wasn't. It wasn't anymore. And then I was scrolling through social media, and I don't know if it was a coincidence or if it was fate, but I saw the casting call for The Apprentice One Championship Edition. And if, I don't know am I supposed to break the barrier of mystery already, or did
You can go.
Go ahead.
okay. I applied to that show. I don't know if your viewers are familiar with The Apprentice, but basically it's the franchise where Trump and Lord Sugar have participated as well. It's ultimately a business reality TV show, a competition style show, where a successful CEO is looking for their protege in business. And Chatri Sityodtong, the CEO of One Championship, the huge MMA league in Asia and also worldwide, was looking for his business protege. And that was the moment I just took a risk. I didn't really think a lot about that, to be honest, because I already knew I needed something new. I'm actually always someone who had a plan. Always thought I had everything figured out. I know what I want to do, and I know what kind of house I want to have, what kind of car I want to drive, and everything. And that was the first moment where I thought to myself, you know what? I have no clue what's going to happen. I have no clue how's that going to work out. I'm just gonna send in my casting video and we'll see where it goes. And yeah, then I've been a part of the show ever since. After that, I realized, okay, when I got eliminated, I mean, of course, I didn't get the job. That's why I work in tech now, not in One Championship. But it was a very, very amazing experience.
Why tech? How did you go from and to be fair, you
Coffee to
did.
fighting to tech.
Yes, and you had martial arts challenges and a bit of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and on the one episode, you went from having to create a every week or every episode, there's a wildly different brief and brain stretching and everything else. So you moved from that into technology.
Mhm. So I have to say I've always been fascinated by tech since I was a small child. You know, the millennial generation is right the generation that's right at the verge, right? We grew up with no mobile phones and suddenly having smartphones, and that has always been so fascinating for me. I remember getting my first laptop when I was 10. It was one of those very, very old Dell laptops that were huge and very heavy, and they were so loud. They sounded basically like a hairdryer. They were, you know, so loud, and I always had to put a fan next to the laptop so it wouldn't. It had to be cooled down, right? And I also remembered getting my first Game Boy when I was, I think, even before I got into elementary school, and I was just so fascinated by all those technological advancements and just things that people can build that actually accelerate the human intelligence that we have, because you know computers and machines, they can do things we humans cannot do, but we have programmed them, we have built them, and that's so fascinating for me.
Stunning.
So, you know what something that I think is fascinating, and obviously there's a lot to the story, right, that you just told. Firstly, I mean, having the courage to look at your career, your chosen sort of field, and go, you know what, this doesn't make me happy anymore, right? You know, I'm not going to lie. I think I have in the past certainly gotten to a point sometimes where I wake up and I go, man, this is not. It doesn't feel like it used to. You know what I mean? Like jumping out of bed, that whole jumping out of bed, being excited to get to the office. You know, we all have our days where we kind of go, man, it doesn't feel like that like it used to. And I think, you know, you mentioned COVID. I think COVID has had a you know, incredible mental health impact on a lot of people. You know, for me, and I think Nick and Warren will agree, working in tech when COVID hit, it was the opposite, right? Like it was an acceleration, an incredible acceleration, because all of a sudden, all of these organizations that, you know, many didn't allow or even think about work from home scenarios, all of a sudden now they had to make a very, very quick, you know, plan to get their workforce working remotely. And so for us, it was an incredibly busy time, and still is, right? It continues to be. And so that part of the story to me is fascinating. But the question I actually was building up to is, there's often been a lot of talk about gatekeeping in tech. There's always, and it's, we see it in even just in different verticals, right? Folks that are trying to get into information security from development or from something like that. There's always sort of a sense of there's the old guard or the gatekeepers who are trying to prevent folks coming in.
Mhm.
Did you find there was much resistance or much of that kind of gatekeeping when you were transitioning into the tech field? Was that something you
Mhm.
had to put up with or bust through much?
I'm actually quite surprised to hear that, because I did not make that experience. Because I don't know, I guess it also probably depends on the people you talk to, and also the way you maybe present yourself also, because I think when I started off in tech, I started talking with a few developers first, because that was the first, the first kind of industry people that I got to know. And I feel like when you just ask very openly about the experiences that they've made in the industry, I have never had a bad experience, but that's just my personal experience that I have. But I don't know. I have never heard about that gatekeeping, and I
And
mean,
I think that's great, right? Because that's a
mhm,
sign that it's going away, and that's ultimately
mhm,
where we all want to be. Is we want to be in a
Mm.
place where everyone is welcome, regardless of where you're coming from, what you look
mhm,
like, the language you speak, and so forth. And
mhm.
so I'm really, really pleased to hear that wasn't something that you kind of experienced, because it's not like you needed another challenge to overcome,
Yeah,
right?
that's true. Yeah.
Okay, Warren.
Oh, is
Anyone?
that for me now? Yeah, you
Oh
see,
no,
the
I
thing is,
was just,
I get to ask the hard questions, right?
of course. That's
I
why
get
you're
to.
here.
So, like, when it comes to your existing role now, I mean,
Mhm,
what exactly do you do now? What is the best part of your job? Would you say? Because I mean, like, a lot of people when they sort of work for themselves, they like sort of set their own rules, and entrepreneurs generally don't like working for other people. I mean, I know like a lot of people that sort of start their own companies and they're like, I work on my own time. So, when it comes to your existing role and how you cope with, let's say, I'm a guy that likes taking orders. I enjoy
mhm,
taking orders fine. I don't think I could ever be an entrepreneur, and it's just, somebody who I am. And I suppose also, how do you deal with that imposter syndrome
Mm.
in your career, right? When it comes to overcoming certain challenges in your existing role, and sort of like, I don't know, it happens to us all the time where we're like, well, geez, do I actually, am I really that good at what I do?
Mm.
So I suppose it's a long question, but I guess you can start by what you do and why you love it, and how you adjusted from owning your own company,
mhm.
or at least starting your own
Okay, so sorry. I am currently a technology consultant at one of those bigger consulting companies. And what I do is I consult companies on cloud migration and implementation. And coming back to your question, yes, I've always been an entrepreneur. But I have realized that there's actually a lot of learning potential when you start working in a corporate setup, because as an entrepreneur, you don't really get to measure, I guess, your skill level or your
Mm.
general professionalism with other people or with other peers. You just have yourself the whole time, and you can, of course, try to be better than you were yesterday, but you
Yes.
don't really have people who actually give you constructive criticism, and sometimes even harsh criticism. You don't really have people who can teach you things about things you've never even thought about or heard about before.
Mm.
And
Mm.
there are just so many things inside a corporate setup that are so beneficial. And I feel like my generation, especially the millennials, they always tend to romanticize entrepreneurship.
company.
Because it's the great freedom, and you can do whatever you want, and you can earn so much money, and it's always so easy. Of course, like that's what the people tell you, right, about entrepreneurship. But that's not true. It's very, very hard, and you have to, always keep yourself in check and everything. But I feel like when you only develop and learn by yourself, there's a certain limit that you reach after a
Mm.
few years. And for me, I've realized that I have reached that limit because I felt like, okay, there isn't really a lot of learning that I'm doing anymore. So I thought to myself, I have to get into a corporate setup. I have to, um, be someone who needs to adapt to a huge team of people who are all smarter than me, because ultimately I was a beginner in tech, and I wasn't used to that. Always used to be the person who, you know, taught people about certain things, but this
Mm.
time I was the one being taught, and I think that's a huge potential, and people underestimate that.
Mm.
And
So speaking
my
of
last-
learning, sorry, Warren, you go ahead.
mine's complete. It's a complete segue because I know I'm going to lose it now. So it's Android or iPhone, Windows or Mac.
Well,
You've gotten
It's a very
religious.
important question. Sorry,
um,
it's
well,
personal.
I wish I wouldn't have known that you work at Microsoft now before, because now I'm a little bit timid.
It doesn't matter. It's fine. I use a Mac. It's cool. But
Okay.
yes,
Well, in
iPhone,
private.
Android, Windows, and Mac.
Okay, I see. Some
I'm not
private,
going to ask which cloud because that I don't
yeah.
even want to know the answer.
Okay. So privately, I've always used an iPhone. Even though my first phone was a Motorola and then an HTC, so I didn't grow up using an iPhone. But as soon as I had an iPhone, actually it was the iCloud that got me into buying a Mac. Also, back then I was still very young. I didn't even have a real clue about cloud technology, but I just thought it was so fascinating. So Mac and iPhone.
Very, very good choices. Okay.
So what I was going to ask you was, you mentioned kind of learning and that sort of sharing and community aspect of working with a team of peers. What's the coolest tech thing that you've learned in the last 6 months? Like technology wise, what's the coolest thing that you've played with or learned in the last 6 months?
I recently just got into chaos engineering. I'm still doing a certification for that, but I just think it's such a fascinating approach on doing things. The way that Netflix has grown, just because of that. I mean, I think the development team consists only of 70 people or something,
Right.
if I'm not mistaken, so less than 100, and that's fascinating how much they have built that whole huge company just by having that clear approach, and developing like a whole personal approach that we've never seen before in the tech world.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's good. It's interesting to see companies like that, and Slack, I think, does things as well, where they develop so much awesome things internally, right? Like not only methodologies, but actual tools that they just release to the public. I'm thinking about there's the Nebula project that I think is a Slack project, which is a network overlay thing, which I think is just insane how they have kind of re-engineered overlay networks. But it's really cool to be able to take those types of lessons from companies like Slack and Netflix, etc., and kind of look at how they're doing and why they were successful and take a learning from that. So that's super cool.
Microsoft have a Chaos Studio now, just by the way.
Tell us about it. Tell us about it, Warren. Tell us.
Well, I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's called Chaos Studio, and you deploy it, right? And then what you do is you set out what you call a chaos experiment, right? Which from start to finish details what goes wrong. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So let's say I want that virtual machine to disconnect from the network. I want that load balancer to fail. I want that app service to die. I want that database to do whatever. And you set out like this plan of what you want to fail. And then you hit the go button and you see what happens. And then it'll take down the database and you'll see if it fails over correctly. You'll see if you lose data. You'll see if you don't lose data, or whatever the case may be is. So the idea is that you take this test environment, you create an experiment, and then you run through it as if a data center, let's say, failed. Let's say DC dies completely. And you're like, okay, does it actually fail over the way it's supposed to fail over? And I guess that's, again, it's the whole chaos monkey, chaos engineering sort of thing. What happens if you had to throw the monkey into the room? And so it gives you the ability to do that now.
I see that chaos engineering is part of the Azure well-architected framework, and that's cool. And I also see there's the Azure Chaos Studio. So I think we'll have to, just for the sake of completeness, stick it into the show notes as well.
Shameless
That's
plug.
my cue.
I'm sorry, I didn't know that Asia also.
No, this is not whose cloud is better than yours. Well, obviously we have some opinions on that, but we don't define people by the cloud that they use. Well, not publicly anyway.
No, not publicly. Not while we're recording. So, speaking of clouds, you live in Germany and work in Germany. I think there's always been some reluctance from the Germans to kind of enter the cloud space. And I know Nick has a fancy German word or expression that kind of describes that, Nick, if you will, before I butcher it.
Yes, it's Daten bleiben, which effectively means that, I think I've just lost some power, which effectively
you lost-
means
they went.
data stays at home.
Right. So I guess the question is, have you found working in the cloud space, particularly in Germany, to be particularly challenging, or do you think that organizations are sort of moving away from that reluctance?
Mhm. So I think there's a difference between, middle-sized or small companies versus big companies, because the bigger companies, they are actually quite open to it because they know that if they do not adapt a cloud strategy, they will be lost behind. And all these big companies that are within the DAX, for example, they are all under immense pressure. So, for example, I'm currently working at a project in the automotive industry, and the automotive industry is very, very, it's a huge shark tank at the moment. Everyone is trying to be better than the other one. Everyone's trying to be the best at when it comes to e-mobility, for example, and that's very crazy. But with the smaller, middle-sized companies, I definitely feel that. I mean, honestly, you can't even go out in Germany, or especially in Berlin, which is the capital city of Germany, and expect every, I don't know, vendor or every cafe restaurant to accept a credit card. That's even crazy, like at some places
Oh,
they only accept cash because they do not trust, Visa or bank or banks or
I mean,
whatever. And that's so crazy, honestly. Germans are always very reluctant when it comes to taking risks, or when they have to trust an external party that they don't know. And I mean, at the end of the day, our company is working with the bigger companies, so that's good. So we have a lot of companies and a lot of projects going on in the cloud space. But with the smaller companies, I mean, I don't know what they're gonna do if they do not start, adapting a cloud strategy.
I think it is a bit of a universal problem, right? I think we
Mm,
find um, I had been working in the US for the last 7 or 8 years, and even in the US, you would think, Microsoft are an American company, Amazon are an American company, and you would think there would be no trust issues, right? But you still do come across, and definitely there's fewer of them, but you certainly do come across companies still who the cloud is, a very dirty word that they do not want to utter. So, I was fascinated about kind of what you would you'd be experiencing, being in Germany. So that's super interesting.
And how do you overcome that? How do you talk to a small or medium company? Bear in mind that you understand what it is to be an entrepreneur, and to now try to convince someone that they should be using something, so that they are not just relevant within their own country, because the opposition may be using a cloud technology that gives them an advantage, but also be relevant in if I can use the overused word of global village.
mhm. I think having the business background, I think I'm quite able to emphasize with what a business owner wants, and ultimately, what the business owner wants is revenue and longevity of their business. And cloud technology cuts a lot of operational costs that they do not see in the beginning. And I think that's something people underestimate, because of course you need to spend a little bit of money in the beginning. It's an investment though, because the more you implement cloud technology, the more money you can save throughout the years. That's the first point. And the second point is also, if you do not start adapting, you will fall behind because cloud technology enables companies to be so much faster, to make faster decisions. They can work from everywhere in the world. And these are so many aspects that also save so much time and brings up the efficiency of the company. And I mean, who would want to lose that, just because
Mm,
they feel like, okay, hey, it's a little bit complicated to understand and so on. I mean,
Mm.
we always have to learn and we always have to adapt. Like even us who work in tech, we always have to get a new certification. We always have to learn about a new technology
Yeah.
and so on. Because if we don't adapt with the time, we will fall behind.
Mm. That's a
it's a
great
very,
answer.
very important, yeah, and a very important lesson, right? It doesn't matter if you've been doing this job for 20 years or if you've been doing this job for 4 years, right? It is a constantly evolving industry, and it is, you need to constantly kind of keep yourself constant and fresh, but also adapt the way you think. Because I think, if we look at a lot of things today, the best practices, and Nick has a lovely word that he uses, a lovely way to describe this, the long tail of previous best practices. And I love it when he talks about that, because ultimately, we find customers all the time that get themselves into this trap, right? And I've been talking to a customer just recently, who are here now. Like they've followed best practices best they could over the period of almost 2 decades, but they're in a position now where they've never changed their thinking from some of those initial best practices, and so they've kind of taken design theory and best practices of design in architecture and infrastructure from 15 years ago, and they still look at that today, right? And now they're in a position where they need to start undoing that, and that becomes very difficult. So the ability to adapt, I think, is and just continue to look at your approaches, I think, is super, super important. We're
Mm.
always going to kind of be there. I love how you said that your finance or business background kind of helps you relate to customers or clients in a better way. I've had this ongoing debate with my brother, because my brother is a business, studied business and worked in business for a long, long time before he had his girls, and he's a stay-at-home dad at the moment, but he's been looking for ways to kind of start keeping his mind busy again. And one of the things that really appeals to him is big data and data analytics.
Mm-hmm.
And so he often says, "Oh, well, I will never do well in tech because I'm not a techie. I'm a business person." And I argue with him all the time that he is in the perfect position to make that transition, because he has a skill set and a knowledge of business. So when he looks at data and when he sort of analyzes things, he has the ability to apply a whole different set of views to it, right? That a normal technical person probably wouldn't think of or may not think of. So I love that you mentioned that, because I think that's another sort of, I'm going to refer him to this podcast the next time we have this conversation.
Oh yeah.
So kind of moving on to inspiring and inspiration and the
Before
learning
we go
piece.
there, Chris,
Yeah.
do you mind if I ask? I do want to turn the lens back onto Kexin before we go to the how to.
Yeah.
There's something which I enjoyed watching on the Netflix show, which is, and actually it won you a whole bunch of points in the various boardroom scenes that we saw, and it was your willingness to discuss how you got to the place where you were as a human being and how adversity shaped you and the effect that it had on you. Do you mind talking to us about that?
Hmm. So on episode 4 of The Apprentice, Chatri kind of bombarded me with a very personal question. I wasn't prepared for it at all. But he basically asked me how I got to the point where I am right now, because he sees that I am a fighter and willing to pull through things. And I think, first of all, the earliest experience of adversity I had was that I grew up in a small German village. So I did not always live in Berlin. I moved to Berlin when I was 10 years old, but a small German village is exactly the way you would imagine, So I think we only have one Italian family in our neighborhood, and that's it. So everyone was
Wow.
basically German, and then us, a Chinese family where the father didn't even really speak proper German.
Mm.
And that, of course, was the talk of the small village, I guess, very, very quick. And during the SARS breakout, and I think it was 2002 or three, if I'm not mistaken, people started getting really, really weird with me. So before they were already weird because they realized, okay, I look different and my family doesn't really speak, German and so on. But in 2002, it got really, really bad. For example, I remember that in PE class, we were supposed to form a circle with our hands. We were supposed to hold hands with our neighbors and form a circle. But my classmates who were standing next to me, they decided to put the sleeve over their hands first before they touched me because
Mm.
apparently I
Wow.
was a dirty, infectious being or whatever. And I mean, of course, that stuck with you. And when at that age, you don't really realize what it meant,
Mm.
of course, but
Mm.
you did realize that there was some kind of issue going on. And I also remember that the parents of my friends started looking at me weirdly and told their kids to not hang out with me as often anymore, and I could felt them whispering and so on. So that was
Mm.
quite bad. And that was also the point where my father made the decision that we have to move into a bigger town, into a bigger city, because staying there would have been very, very bad for us. So then we moved to Berlin, and that was a lot better because in Berlin we have a lot of immigrants, and I also went to an international school, and that was actually the first time for me where I saw people who looked differently as well just get along with each others,
Mm.
and not that being a topic at all the
Mm.
whole time, and that was very amazing. And I also have to say, I think that was my saving haven in that
Mm.
sense, because if we wouldn't have moved to Berlin, I don't know what kind of person I would have become, to be honest.
But you allowed that adversity not to crush you. I remember you saying that it made you and gave you actually an advantage.
That's true. Yes. I think quite early on in life, I realized, okay, you kind of have the power to decide what kind of person you want to be and the life that you want to live. And I think a lot of people always take failures or adversity as a reason for why they cannot be successful. But actually, when you watch movies, for example, of superheroes, all superheroes always have a very, very bad background. They go through struggles and they have a lot of pain points in their life. But these kind of failures and struggles and pain points are actually a part of the success story and make them to the person that they are, with wanting to save the weaker people, or being strong because they have endured a lot already. And I think instead of just putting those negative feelings aside and just, only focusing on the positive, that's actually a bad approach. You have to take these negative things and put them into your positive
Mm.
things that you have experienced, because this is all a part of a very, very beautiful thing that defines you.
Stunning. Chris, I want to hand back to you.
Yes, no, I mean, I really, I think what I was going to ask was, we mentioned, um, you mentioned education. We've talked about kind of learning and constant learning, right? And one of the things I think that we like to do on this show is talk about or help the listener kind of get a feeling for, like, how could they become you, right? And very often there's a kid somewhere, and I know Nick has two daughters and Warren has a daughter. There are young girls who are potentially looking to enter into tech, right?
Mm.
And what do you have any, like, words of wisdom, or some advice, or things that you can sort of impart on them, on specifically, I think, young girls who are potentially wanting to embark on a career in tech and looking at this and going, wow, this might be something that I can't do. What can you um, help them believe that they can?
I think I have to say, a big, big thing in life for any kind of success is a little bit of healthy naivety. How do you say naivety?
Naivety.
Healthy naivety.
Mm.
Because if you just I think a lot of people are reluctant to go into tech because they feel they overanalyze things. They analyze why they can't do it. They analyze why this industry is hard. They analyze why it's too late for them, and so on and so on. But our heads do not always tell us the truth. Is something that
Mm.
I've learned, and because it's so, it's so influenced by outside influences, and that's not good at all. I think just being a little bit naive and believing in yourself and always thinking about the moments where you have proven to yourself that you are able and capable to do things, and also tap into your inner, into your inner power, I guess, or how Shatra always called it, the inner warrior, and just believing that no matter what happens, you can pull through it because you have proven to yourself that you can. I think that's the best approach to do anything in life.
Mm, mm. One of the things that resonates with me from your story is that there is no one way or one path into an industry, and that you are effectively the sum of your experiences, and you using the past that you have, which has helped shape your character. You've got a multicultural divergence that you can draw from in terms of problem solving. You have a number of advantages that in a previous decade would have been disadvantages, and now actually are success enablers and even accelerators in your current career. And how I've seen that is, I'm a first generation South African living in South Africa with the challenges that we have. However, my ancestry is German. So coming from a highly structured environment such as Germany and living in a highly unstructured environment such as South Africa, the kind of decisions that we would make from an IT point of view is how to plan for failure, and failure of everything. So we don't even take power as guaranteed. And I remember talking to a German family members about uninterruptible power supplies in case the power went out. And they asked me, why would that happen? And so because that's not part of the decision tree, they wouldn't plan for that. And the summary of what I'm saying is that as a consultant going into other highly structured environments overseas, we have been able to solve problems that people who come from highly structured environments couldn't. And the sum of your experiences are a distinct advantage to the career that you've chosen, and we want to celebrate that.
Oh, thank you. I think that's very beautifully put. That's true for sure, because I do believe that people who have always experienced only successes and only good moments, once they have their first failure moment, they get thrown off guard. They're all like, "Okay, what do I do now? This feels weird, and I've never experienced that before." But people who are used to chaos, I guess, or people who are used to feeling negative emotions and experience them overcoming them, they are so much more welcoming even of these kind of challenges. Yeah, and I think there's this very interesting term like the phoenix servers, and I think people who are successful are small phoenix servers as well, because they always rise from the ashes, and they always manage to reinvent themselves and just learn from the past failures.
That's lovely. So let me just refer back to Chris and Warren before we ask Kexin, what does she want to plug? Is there anything else that you guys want to ask?
No, I think you've captured it just perfectly, right? And I think Nick also, I think it cannot be overstated that really the tech industry is for anyone who wants to be here or be involved can be involved, right? And I think you said it really, really well when you said, there's not one or two entry points. You don't have to write code to work in tech. And I think, breaking down those barriers or continuing to break those barriers is super important work. And Kexin, congratulations. And I think your story is super inspiring, to all of us. And so really appreciative of you sharing it as openly as you have with us as well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and you're living proof, I guess, that you can be whatever the hell you want to be.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, especially in our age, you can Google basically anything. I think I started learning a little bit more about tech through YouTube tutorials. To be honest, I bought
Yes.
some courses via Udemy. There are so many informations available. People just have to, stop being scared of hard work, I guess, and just have to let go of the image they have of themselves and just, be open enough to create a new story for themselves.
Exactly.
Bravo, Kexin, gut gemacht. So
Okay.
let's just ask you, what is it that you would like to plug, and you can plug anything. Could be your socials, how you want to be found, how you don't want to be found. If you'd like to be found for further interviews, how would people do that?
I think I have two big channels. One of them is LinkedIn, and the other one is Instagram. So LinkedIn is definitely for the professional setup, right? Obviously, but I mean, young girls, for example, or anyone who's also interested in the person that I am in private, they can also tap into my Instagram account, Kexin Ye, which is a pseudonym that I came up with in high school, so I just kept it since then.
Fantastic.
Stunning.
We'll definitely share those to make sure folks can get
Thank
hold
you.
of you. And yeah, again, thank you so much for
Thank you.
agreeing to talk to us and sharing your story, and I guess inspiring us too. Right? I think that's it's been a really really good episode.
Thank you all. It's been a pleasure.